The blood was still wet on the scaffold when Henry VIII called for Catherine Tilney to warm his bed. Tower guards hadn't even finished cleaning the block where Catherine Howard's head had rolled into the straw just 6 hours earlier. The 19-year-old Queen's body lay in an unmarked grave while her cousin prepared perfumed sheets for the king who'd ordered her death. Henry ate roasted swan that night. He specifically requested musicians play dancing tunes. His dead wife's ladies-in-waiting could hear the laughter from their mourning chamber. Catherine Howard had been the most beautiful woman in England. Now she was a headless corpse wrapped in black cloth. The girl who'd danced until dawn at court, just months earlier, was buried without ceremony next to her cousin Anne Boleyn. Another queen Henry had beheaded. But Henry wasn't thinking about Catherine that night. He was already planning his 6th wedding. The orchestra played until 3 in the morning. How does a man execute his teenage wife for adultery and celebrate with her maid before the blood dries? The answer starts with a single letter that arrived on November 2nd, 1541. But to understand why Henry slaughtered the girl he'd called his rose without a thorn, you need to know what happened in a dirty back room at Lambeth Palace 12 years earlier. Catherine Howard was 7 years old when her father dumped her at her step-grandmother's house. The Dowager Duchess of Norfolk ran her mansion like a warehouse for unwanted noble girls. 30 young women slept in a single dormitory. No adults supervised them after dark. The doors had no locks. What happened in that room would eventually put Catherine's neck on the block. The girls called it the Maiden's Chamber, but virginity didn't last long there. Every night after the Duchess went to bed, men climbed through the windows. The older girls taught the younger ones how to please visitors. They shared techniques like recipes. Catherine watched 11-year-olds practice on each other. By the time she turned 13, her music teacher, Henry Mannix, was already grooming her. Mannix was 36 years old. He told Catherine she was special. He brought her strawberries and silk ribbons. During their private lessons, he taught her more than virginal. He'd lock the door and pull her onto his lap. When the Duchess almost caught them, Mannix hid behind a chest while Catherine straightened her skirts. She was barely a teenager. He told her this was how adults showed love. But that wasn't even the worst. The other girls knew exactly what was happening. They gossiped about the noises from the music room. Some were jealous. They wanted their own grown men bringing them presents. Mary Lascelles watched through the keyhole one afternoon. She saw Mannix put his hand under Catherine's skirt. She saw Catherine giggle and squirm. Mary would remember this scene very clearly when interrogators asked her about it 8 years later. The real horror was still coming. Francis Derham arrived at Lambeth when Catherine was 14. He was her distant cousin, handsome and violent. Derham didn't bother with music lessons or grooming. He simply claimed Catherine as his property. The first night, he brought wine to the Maiden's Chamber. By the third night, he was in her bed. Derham called Catherine his wife. He gave her money. He left his shirt in her bed as a warning to other men. When another boy tried to kiss Catherine, Derham broke his nose. He bragged to everyone that he'd taken her virginity. Catherine didn't deny it. She couldn't. Too many girls had watched it happen. Joan Bulmer slept in the next bed. She later testified that Derham visited Catherine's bed over 100 times. She described the sounds in detail, the rustling, the whispers, the rhythmic creaking. Sometimes Derham stayed until dawn. The other girls would lie silent, pretending to sleep. They counted the minutes until he left. Catherine knew the price of refusing. Another girl named Dorothy Barwick had rejected a visitor. The man held her down while 3 others took turns. The girls who fought back got hurt worse. So Catherine learned to smile. She learned to pretend she wanted it. She was 15 years old and already an expert at faking pleasure. What happened next changed everything. In 1539, Catherine's uncle noticed her at a family gathering. The Duke of Norfolk saw opportunity. King Henry had just divorced his 4th wife, Anne of Cleves. He needed a new queen. Catherine was young, beautiful, and supposedly virgin. Her uncle brought her to court immediately. Henry was 49 years old and rotting alive. His leg wound stank so badly that courtiers could smell him 3 rooms away. Pus leaked through his stockings. He weighed over 300 pounds. He couldn't walk without help. But he was still the king. When he saw 19-year-old Catherine Howard, he decided God had finally sent him true love. The wedding happened on July 28, 1540. Henry gave Catherine jewels worth more than most nobles earned in a lifetime. He called her his perfect pearl. He paraded her around court like a prize horse. Old men wrote poems about her beauty. Young men dreamed about her in secret. Henry thought he'd won. He had no idea what those girls from Lambeth knew. But secrets don't stay buried. Joan Bulmer wanted money. She wrote to Catherine demanding a position at court. Her letter mentioned things from the past. Catherine gave her a job immediately. Then Dorothy Barwick showed up. Then another girl. Soon, half the maiden's chamber worked in the Queen's household. They knew too much to refuse. Francis Derham appeared next. He swaggered into court like he owned it. Catherine made him her private secretary. She had no choice. He knew everything. He'd kept her love letters. He reminded her daily that he'd been there first. He whispered about their 100 nights together. Catherine paid him to stay quiet, but Derham wanted more than money. The blackmail might have worked forever. Henry was old and blind with love. He gave Catherine anything she asked for. She could have hired the entire Lambeth household. But Catherine made one fatal mistake. She fell in love with Thomas Culpeper. Culpeper was Henry's favorite courtier. He was young, handsome, and stupid. He looked like everything Henry used to be. Catherine couldn't help herself. After 2 years of pretending to enjoy Henry's diseased body, she wanted someone who didn't smell like death. She started writing love letters. She arranged secret meetings. She thought she was careful. Lady Rochford helped them. She was Catherine's lady-in-waiting and had her own reasons for hating Henry. Her husband, George Boleyn, had been executed alongside Anne Boleyn. She wanted revenge. She stood guard while Catherine and Culpeper met in empty rooms. She carried their letters. She lied to everyone. She enjoyed watching Catherine betray the king who'd killed her husband. The meetings got bolder. Catherine gave Culpeper a velvet cap. He gave her a gold chain. They kissed in alcoves. They held hands during Mass. Once, Henry almost caught them in Catherine's chamber. Culpeper hid behind a tapestry, while Catherine distracted her husband with false affection. Henry never suspected. He was too busy planning their future children. But Mary Lascelles remembered those music lessons from 8 years ago. She'd married and found religion. Her conscience tortured her. In October 1541, she told her brother John about Catherine's past. John told the Archbishop. The Archbishop wrote it all down. On November 2nd, he slipped the letter to Henry during Mass. Henry didn't believe it at first. He ordered a secret investigation. Within days, they had everything. Joan Bulmer confessed immediately. She described Derham's visits in vivid detail. Dorothy Barwick confirmed every word. The other girls fell over themselves, providing evidence. They all wanted to save their own necks. The investigation found more than old stories. They discovered the love letters to Culpeper. Catherine had written them in her own hand. She'd signed one, "Yours, as long as life endures." Investigators found the velvet cap in Culpeper's room. They found witness after witness who'd seen them together. Lady Rochford broke after 1 hour of questioning. Henry cried when they showed him the evidence. Real tears. Courtiers had never seen him weep before. Then the tears turned to rage. He screamed for a sword. He said he'd kill Catherine himself. His counselors had to physically restrain him. He spent 3 days alternating between sobbing and threatening murder. They arrested Catherine on November 12th. She was in her chambers when the guards arrived. She knew immediately. She'd been waiting for this moment since her wedding night. The Archbishop listed her crimes while she stood silent. Adultery, treason, deception. Each word meant death. But the real torture hadn't started yet. They stripped Catherine of her queenly privileges one by one. First her jewels, then her servants, then her royal apartment. They moved her to Sion Abbey to wait for trial. She had 2 ladies to attend her. No visitors, no books, no music, just stone wall. And silence. The interrogations began immediately. They wanted every detail from Lambeth. How many men? How many times? What positions? What words? Catherine tried to minimize at first. She admitted Derham had touched her. She denied full intercourse. The interrogators laughed. They had Joan Bulmer's testimony about the 100 nights. Derham didn't last long under torture. They racked him until his joints separated. He screamed out every detail of their relationship. He named dates. He described birthmarks on Catherine's body that only a lover would know. He told them about the money she'd given him. He even claimed they'd been pre-contracted to marry, which would make Catherine's marriage to Henry invalid. Culpeper broke even faster. He admitted to intending adultery, but swore they'd never consummate it. The investigators didn't believe him. They had too many witnesses, too many secret meetings, too many love letters. Lady Rochford had already told them about the sounds she'd heard through closed doors. The trials were formality. English law was clear. A queen who committed adultery committed treason. The sentence was always death. They tried Derham and Culpeper on December 1st. Both were found guilty. The only question was the method of execution. Derham got the full traitor's death. On December 10th, they dragged him to Tyburn. The crowd watched as they hanged him until nearly dead. Then they cut him down. While he was still conscious, they castrated him. They sliced open his belly and pulled out his intestines. He was still alive when they started burning them. Only after his organs were ash did they behead him. They cut, gave his body into quarters, and displayed the pieces around London. Culpeper got lucky. As a gentleman, he earned a clean beheading. They executed him the same day as Derham. He wore a velvet doublet to the scaffold. His last words were about Catherine. He died thinking she loved him. The crowd cheered when his head rolled. They stuck it on a pike on London Bridge right next to Derham's. Catherine heard about the executions at Sion Abbey. She stopped eating. She'd spend hours practicing laying her head on a makeshift block. She asked for the real one to be brought to her cell. She wanted to rehearse dying gracefully. The guards watched her kneel and position her neck over and over. She was determined not to struggle. But Henry wasn't done destroying evidence of his humiliation. Parliament passed a special law making it treason for a woman to marry the king without revealing her sexual past. They made it retroactive. Then, they went after everyone who'd known about Lambeth. The Dowager Duchess was arrested. Lord William Howard was imprisoned. Every member of the Howard family was questioned. Even Catherine's brothers were investigated. Henry wanted the entire bloodline punished. Only the Duke of Norfolk survived by groveling and denouncing his own niece. Lady Rochford didn't escape. They charged her with facilitating treason. She went insane in the Tower. She smeared feces on the walls. She screamed about headless ghosts. She tore out her own hair. Parliament passed another law allowing the execution of insane people. Henry wanted her dead, regardless of her mental state. They moved Catherine to the Tower on February 10th, 1542. She traveled by barge past London Bridge. She had to look up at Culpeper's rotting head. Some say she smiled. Others say she fainted. The guards reported she said nothing during the entire journey. Catherine spent 3 days in the Tower. She wore her finest dress. She practiced her final speech. She prayed. On February 12th, they told her she'd die the next morning. She asked what time. They said dawn. She requested the block be sharp. They promised it would be. The scaffold was ready by 5 in the morning on February 13th. They'd built it low so the crowd could see better. Fresh straw covered the platform. The block was painted black. The executioner had sharpened his axe until it could split a hair. Everything was perfect for killing a 19-year-old girl. Catherine walked to the scaffold at 7. She wore crimson velvet. Her ladies had sewn jewels into her hair. She looked beautiful. The crowd fell silent when they saw her. Some men cried. She was younger than many of their daughters. She tried to give her prepared speech, but forgot the words. She managed to say she deserved death. She asked people to pray for the king. Then she knelt. The executioner was quick. One stroke clean. Her head rolled into the straw while her body twitched. Blood spurted 3 feet. The crowd barely had time to gasp. Lady Rochford died 20 minutes later. She'd recovered her sanity at the last moment. She confessed to facilitating meetings between Catherine and Culpeper. She said she deserved death. The same axe, the same block. Her blood mixed with Catherine's. They buried both women in the Tower Chapel within the hour. But here's what the history books don't emphasize. That very night, Henry ordered Catherine Tilney to his chambers. She was Catherine Howard's maid. She'd lived at Lambeth too. She knew all the same secrets. But Henry didn't care about that anymore. He had a new young woman to distract him. Catherine Tilney had watched her mistress die that morning. She'd heard the thud of the axe. She'd seen the blood. Now she had to smile and undress for the man who'd ordered the execution. She had to pretend arousal while Catherine's body cooled in the ground. She had no choice. Refusing the king meant death. Henry celebrated that night like nothing had happened. He ordered venison and wine. He demanded entertainment. Musicians played while he pawed at Catherine Tilney. He gave her a necklace that had belonged to Catherine. He made jokes about finding a 6th wife. Courtiers laughed and drank. They pretended the day's executions were already forgotten. The other ladies in waiting huddled in their chambers. They could hear the music. They could smell the feast. Some prayed. Some cried. All of them wondered if they'd be next. They knew Henry's pattern. Love, marriage, accusation, execution, and immediate replacement. Catherine Tilney survived that night. She survived many nights, but she never became the 6th wife. Henry married Catherine Parr a year later. Catherine Tilney disappeared from court records. Maybe she learned the lesson. Maybe she ran. Maybe she just got lucky. The truth is that Henry slept soundly after killing Catherine Howard. He never mentioned her again. He had her portraits destroyed. He banned her name from court. He erased her like she'd never existed. The girl he'd called his perfect pearl became nothing, not even a memory worth keeping. But the Tower Ravens remembered. Guards reported finding them clustered around the scaffold for weeks. They pecked at the stained straw. They fought over invisible scraps. Some said they were eating fragments of flesh. Others said the birds were drawn to the smell of noble blood. The scaffold had to be burned to make them stop. Catherine's ghost supposedly haunts Hampton Court. People claim to hear her screaming in the gallery. They say she runs the same route she took when guards arrested her. She begs for mercy that never comes. She pounds on doors that won't open. The screaming stops at the chapel entrance. That's where the guards caught her the first time. But ghosts are just stories. The real horror is the living women who survived. Joan Bulmer lived another 20 years knowing she'd helped kill her childhood friend. Mary Lascelles died believing, say she'd done God's work. The other Lambeth girls scattered across England. They married quickly. They kept quiet. They never spoke about the Maiden's Chamber again. Francis Derham's quarters weren't the only ones decorating London. They left his genitals to rot at Tyburn. Dogs eventually ate them. His head stayed on London Bridge for 6 months. The eyes were gone within days. Birds nested in his skull. Children threw stones at it. By summer, only the skull remained. They finally threw it in the Thames when it started falling apart. Thomas Culpeper's head lasted longer. The executioner had dipped it in tar. It turned black and shiny. Merchants sold miniature versions as souvenirs. Young women bought them as warnings. Here's what happens when you seduce a queen. Here's the price of royal adultery. The real head grinned down at customers until 1547. Henry commissioned a new portrait 2 weeks after Catherine's execution. He looked younger in it. The artist had instructions to minimize the bloat, to hide the leg wound, to restore the athletic build. The painting showed Henry as he wanted to be seen. Powerful, virile, definitely not a man who just murdered a teenager for doing what he'd taught her to crave. The court returned to normal within a month. New young women arrived. They curtsied and smiled. They pretended Henry was handsome. They competed for his attention. They all knew about Catherine Howard. They'd all heard the stories. But poverty was worse than death. So they danced. They flirted. They risked their necks for jewels and position. Henry died 5 years later on January 28, 1547. The leg wound that killed him had turned gangrenous. He spent his last days rotting from the inside out. The smell was so bad that servants drew lots to see who had to attend him. He weighed over 400 pounds. It took 8 men to carry his coffin. They buried him next to Jane Seymour, his third wife, the only one who'd given him a son, the only one who died before he could kill her. Catherine Howard's grave is 60 feet away. No marker, no memorial, just bones in unconsecrated ground. She's buried between 2 other queens Henry killed. Anne Boleyn on one side, Lady Rochford nearby. 3 women who lost their heads for disappointing the same man. But Catherine Tilney outlived them all. The maid who warmed Henry's bed while her mistress's blood was still wet. She died peacefully in 1571. Old age, natural causes, a full life. Catherine never got to live. She took her secrets to the grave. Nobody knows what Henry said that night. Nobody knows what she had to do. History only records that she was there, in his bed, 6 hours after the execution. That's the truth about power. It doesn't just kill. It replaces. Before the blood dries. Before the bodies cool. Before anyone has time to mourn. Henry VIII executed his teenage wife for adultery in the morning and celebrated with her maid that night. He ate roasted swan. He listened to dancing tunes. He gave away dead women's jewels. And everyone pretended it was normal. Because in Tudor England, it was.